Hello lads, lassies, and those of unspecified gender, it's the Irishman here, and today, we're going to be talking about something that could be referred to in many different ways. What if Bruce Wayne was a Saiyan? What if Goku was Batman? But admittedly, the best title for this story is what if Goku landed in Gotham? Everyone's always talking about Goku versus Superman, Goku versus Superman, but what about Batman? Sure, he might not be anywhere near as strong as Superman, and there's no real contingencies for the Saiyans. However, what if Goku was Batman? What if he was the one with the superhuman mind who could come up with strategies on the fly? Give the smartest man alive the power to be stronger than any living being, but keep him in the same world with beings like Superman or Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and Cyborg. Would Bruce still don the black cape of justice? Or would he turn to a different route? What would happen in this story? Well, that's what I'm here to figure out. Come with me as we discuss the story of this What If. A young man in a fine suit was walking down an alleyway with his parents. They were discussing the film they had just went and seen when suddenly a man approaches. He was grovelly, dirty, probably didn't have a lot of money to his name, and little did he know he was holding the most powerful man and woman in the entire city, nigh the entire country, at gunpoint. Well, maybe that's exaggerating, but the way they held themselves in such high regard, you would never know. Although there was little they could do, because even though they had political power, they had no real strength. So a simple gun was enough to put both of them down. However, their kid wouldn't be so unlucky. Not a single bullet was sent his way as cops were approaching. The robber just decided to grab everything he could before scurrying off. Young Bruce, of course, would want to try and fight back or chase after the man that just killed his parents, but he's still a young lad. He has no idea what's going on. His brain can barely process everything that just went on in front of him, so his natural reaction is just to crawl into his parents' arms, even though they can't cuddle him anymore. He lets out a whimper and then a roar as his power elevates to unprecedented heights. Although this is still his base form. He might be a Saiyan, but he doesn't have the necessary strength to turn into any sort of legendary warrior. At least not yet, as from that day forward he dedicates the rest of his life to getting vengeance on the kind of crime that took his parents away from him. Not just the man who pulled the trigger, but rather the system that made him do it. He would take strikes both at the people who killed innocents, as well as those who allowed them to do so. But eventually, Bruce would come to realize there's no legal way to handle these problems, and thus he can't go after those who enable these criminals, just the problem themselves. The root cause will have to wait, as for the moment, punching and kicking seems to be the answer. So he would travel the world and learn how to do so better than anybody else, training with assassins, warlords, masters, such as Master Roshi, as well as groups of the most powerful beings on the planet, although he never came in contact with anyone like Superman or Wonder Woman on these trips. Rather, he just trained with those who had amazing technique, rather than actual physical strength. He would learn of his origins as a being from a far-off planet, not unlike Kal-El of Krypton. However, he was from a different race of people. Not a peaceful utopia, more like a war-riddled wasteland. He belongs to a race known as the Saiyans, who would go from planet to planet, conquering worlds in the name of the Galactic Emperor Frieza. He would learn all of this after his training was complete. Somewhere along the years where he practiced in all sorts of different martial arts, he would regrow his tail and realize that he was different from the average person. Not only did he have distinct and unique characteristics, but he also had incredible strength. Far beyond the likes of any regular human, he was able to throw cars and move mountains, something no regular man should be capable of. With his superhuman mind, as well as extensive arrays of resources from Wayne Tech, he would create a device capable of scanning the nearby galaxies for any DNA that at least closely matches his own. He already knew that this would be the result of this scanning, but he discovers his parents weren't his actual parents. They were people who found him, adopted him, and raised him as their own. He's ever thankful for what they did, and he will always recognize them as his parents. However, he has a deep-seated curiosity as to who his actual parents are, so he begins looking into it. Although, in terms of a match to his biological structure, he wouldn't find his mother and father, but rather his brother, Raditz, a warmongerer, somebody that goes out and conquers planets, killing civilizations by the millions. Bruce would be enraged by this and decides that he must make contingencies. He has to have a way to defend the Earth just in case this horrible man who is so closely related to him ever comes to their planet. And this is when he forms the Justice League, a group consisting of the world's mightiest heroes: Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, and of course himself, the Batman. He needed a secret identity, some way to conceal who he really was from those who might aim to harm him and his family. And although he doesn't worry much for his own personal safety, he does have other people he cares for, and doesn't want them to get in the line of fire. Now, if you're hoping to see some of Batman's regular crooks appear in this story, I'm sorry to say, they most likely won't. People like the Riddler and Clayface might present some sort of a challenge given Batman's still human mind, but they would have already been killed in Batman's early years. Before he would have developed his philosophy against killing, he would have taken out Gotham's biggest threats. The only person who would have escaped Batman's rampage would be the Joker. He was clever enough to get away and knew when not to come out of hiding. In fact, he is still planning his awaited return. However, he does have to make certain preparations. So, for the meantime, the biggest threat to Gotham is also the biggest threat to the world. That of the Saiyans. Raditz, Nappa, Vegeta. People who can destroy planets if they really want to. Entire worlds gone in a flash. Pun very much intended. Now, only certain people will be going up against Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta when they do eventually arrive, this being Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, because, of course, Bruce is capable of going head-to-head with other Saiyans because he is one. Although Superman and Wonder Woman are able to keep up with his strength, the former of those two actually being leagues beyond Batman's overall power output, although that is changing, as Bruce continues to train himself to get strong enough to overcome Kal-El, which in turn pushes the Kryptonian to enhance his own abilities. A couple of years after the Justice League was formed, Green Lantern would arrive at the headquarters, telling everybody that the day has come. One of the Saiyans that Bruce has warned them about will be arriving on Earth in roughly 3 days. Batman would ask which one, since their powers did vary. If it was the weakest, then there shouldn't be any sort of a problem, although if it's the one known as Prince Vegeta, then this could actually be a challenge. However, Hal couldn't exactly tell. He was just informed by one of his other lanterns that something resembling a Saiyan space pod was going to be intercepting the planet that Hal Jordan was currently residing over. So Bruce informs them that he needs to take some time to prepare, getting Superman to come with him to a place that he discovered not too long ago. This being Kami's Lookout. He had trained with Roshi years ago, and learned of Master Korin, where he also trained for quite some time, although was able to see through what the kitty cat was getting at. So he was able to surpass his training and eventually reach the gods above. Although he didn't actually get permission to train with Kami until recently, and now is their chance. So Kal-El and Bruce would both head to the Lookout. Bruce would inform the Guardian of Earth of their position and what was coming in only 3 days. So Kami would direct them to the Room of Spirit and Time, a place where they can get a year's worth of training in only a day. Bruce had known about this device, but he hadn't actually trained in there yet. He was waiting for the prime opportunity, and this is just that. So the Kryptonian and Saiyan alike both enter the room of spirit and time. They leave after only one day, and when the Saiyans arrive, they are more than prepared. They immediately attack the space pods, ensuring that the Saiyans won't be able to leave. This time, it wasn't just Raditz. It was also Nappa and Vegeta following behind. They realized that there were more powerful entities on Earth than they could have expected, multiple in the multi-thousand range, so they had to go and investigate all three together. But when they get there, they find people stronger than they ever could have imagined. They have no way to get off the planet because of the destroyed space pods, and the people defending this planet are stronger than they ever could have believed. All of the Justice League launches an all-out assault, and within only a couple of seconds, all three Saiyans are on the ground, paralyzed to where they can't even move a muscle. But it's not just because of the damage they would have sustained in that short time, but rather because Wonder Woman had used her lasso of truth to bind all of them together. Bruce had some questions he wanted to ask them, and he didn't want to give them the opportunity to lie. He starts off by asking about his mother and his father. Where are they, and if they're even alive? To which Raditz says in a more somber tone that they were killed along with the rest of planet Vegeta only a couple of years ago. Well, a couple is a relative term. It was more like 20. Bruce was actually only sent there because his parents wanted the young man to survive, and it seems that he did. In fact, it seems like he's flourished. He's a proud warrior, and he's capable of defeating even the strongest in their ranks. Diana scoffs, realizing that the planet that the Saiyans resided on was named after their king. What kind of envious and egotistical person names an entire realm after themselves? And the prince scoffs. His ego is not to be made fun of. However, Diana just chooses to pull on the lasso tighter, making the restraints even more unbearable. She's showing just who exactly is in charge here. Nappa has the biggest smile on his face because, as we know, Saiyans adore powerful women, and Diana is by far the strongest that he's ever seen. To a point, she reciprocates the smirk, seeing the good inside of these three, even if it is locked down deep inside. But the big lug seems pretty likable at least, so maybe they can give them a chance at redemption. Kal-El agrees, and even Bruce does as well. However, he does have some more questions he needs to ask before they're let off the hook. And even once they are let free, they're going to be under close supervision, because even though they don't want to kill them, they are still planet-destroying monsters after all. A couple of hours would pass, and Bruce gets all of the information he needs. He now understands everything there is to know about the Saiyans, as well as who Frieza and his army is. Vegeta would be quick to point out that they are not the villains here. They are just under the employ of an absolute genocidal maniac, known as Frieza, a galactic tyrant. If they're looking for someone to put their head on a spike, then it should be Frieza, not the Saiyans. They're merely victims here. If anything, their two groups should be teaming up, something that Nappa seconds as hard as he can. And although Raditz definitely wants to get out of this alive, he's not talking much. He's remorseful. He realizes that by all means Kakarot has succeeded in life, whereas Nappa is still just some guy who kills innocent men, women, and children for the fun of it. For the first time in his life, he feels sorry for those who he has harmed, and Bruce can see this, so he has Diana let Raditz go. That way, Batman can spend some one-on-one time with his brother. She complies before then tightening the grip back on Nappa and Vegeta. She's going to bring them back to Themyscira for some much-needed rehabilitation. Nappa absolutely loves the sound of that, only until realizing she means meditation rather than what he was thinking of. However, much to the Saiyan's surprise, Diana says that's not entirely out of the question. Vegeta is entirely grossed out, but also a little jealous, all things considered. But getting back to the Bat family, Bruce would be introducing Raditz to his newly adopted son, Dick Grayson, who was being trained to be Robin, Batman's idea of a sidekick. Somebody who could keep Gotham safe while Bruce was out defending the rest of the world, and possibly even the universe, now that Raditz has showed him all of these other greater threats. As long as somebody is there and can take Batman's spot, then he can defend everybody in need, not needing to stop at Gotham or even Earth. But sadly, it's going to take a while before Robin will be safe defending the streets of Gotham, because although Bruce is superhuman, Robin is just human. And Ki doesn't work the same way it does in just Dragon Ball, as energy is a very complicated thing, so you can't just master it in a couple of days and be able to fly after just one lesson. No, instead it would take years to be able to get that level of mastery, unless you're a race like the Saiyans and Namekians that inherently have that sort of ability. A great efficiency with Ki that allows you to be able to destroy entire moons with just the flick of a finger. If any average Joe could access that kind of power, there's no telling what kind of danger the Earth would be in every Tuesday. Specifically Tuesdays because all supervillains hate tacos. That's why they're supervillains. The point I'm making is that even though it's difficult, Bruce is training Robin to be able to defend the city while he's off defending the universe. And with Raditz by his side, it might be a little bit easier than he had first expected. The two would begin training in a room that Bruce had developed, a place that is meant to simulate harsh environments, such as the most scalding days on the Sahara, or the top of Mount Everest, where it's the coldest and the air is the thinnest. And although it is effective at the beginning, it begins to wear off the more and more they're exposed to it. Even with rapid switches, this training doesn't do much for them, aside from allow them to have a more dangerous environment to spar in. Raditz would bring up the idea of training in higher gravity, like the gravity that was on planet Vegeta, 10 times that of Earth. In fact, the blue orb has a relatively weak gravity compared to other planets, and although this does sound somewhat effective, Bruce says they should only keep it at 10 times, since any further, and even that, would absolutely annihilate the human body. But if they were able to survive in 10 times, then they should be able to do it here. Raditz would bring up a pretty good point though. They're not human. Everything Bruce knows about the human body most likely doesn't apply to them, aside from the basics like having a heart and eyes and a brain. Everything past the basic essentials should be entirely unknown to Bruce, and he's actually right. He always just assumed that his biology, as well as his body's limits, were the same as a human, even if he was able to do extraordinary things and take in extreme damage. So he begins researching his own body, his own limits, and he discovers he really doesn't have any. Sure, his body can't do anything. It's not like he can stretch like Plastic Man or survive inside of a star like Superman or gain power from it, that is. But he really doesn't have any sort of physical limitations. He can get as strong as he wants to, and he can never really stop growing. Stop growing in terms of power. In terms of height, he peaked at 6'2". The point is that he and Raditz can survive in practically any conditions, and can continue sparring in those very same conditions to grow their power to unprecedented heights. Although eventually protecting the Earth isn't enough, they can't keep using the excuse that they're just training as a reason to stand idly by while Frieza is slaughtering millions, countless planets destroyed, and civilizations filled with innocent people gone in the blink of an eye. One day, Guy Gardner would arrive on Earth discussing with his fellow Green Lantern about a planet that had recently been destroyed under his watch. It was known as Metamor, home of the Metamorans, who are famous for their fusion techniques, although all working together still were not enough to take down the Galactic Emperor and his goons. The entire planet was destroyed and everybody on it killed instantly. This kind of heinous behavior cannot go on any longer, and especially not unpunished. So Guy and Hal gather together the Justice League. They're going to take the fight to Frieza before it happens the other way around.